When I first moved into Willow Creek Estates, it felt like stepping into one of those glossy magazine spreads about the ideal suburban dream. Freshly painted mailboxes stood in perfect rows, lawns gleamed greener than a painter's palette, and every evening, golden light poured across the quiet cul-de-sac like a soft blanket. It was the kind of place where people waved as you drove by, where every hedge seemed trimmed to the same height, and where nothing bad ever happened, or so I thought. I moved there for peace, after losing too much in just a few short years. My marriage, a job I'd poured myself into, and the big city that drained me. I wanted one thing, calm. And at first, I found exactly that. I had my little house, modest but cozy, and I had Cooper, my golden retriever, the last thread of happiness I'd held onto when everything else unraveled. Cooper was 5 years old then, gentle, affectionate, a walking embodiment of sunshine. He wasn't just a pet. He was family. The kind of dog who made strangers smile at the grocery store parking lot or nudge your hand when you were too lost in thought. Never growled, never snapped, barely barked. To most people, he was perfect, but not to everyone. It started as a faint tremor, something so small you almost ignore it. My second week in, while walking Cooper down Maple Grove Lane, I saw her for the first time. Karen. She stood by her manicured flower bed in a crisp sun hat and pressed blouse, the kind of person whose posture alone screamed authority. Her yard glistened with expense. Stone pathways, sculpted topiary, plants that looked too vibrant to be real. When our eyes met, she gave me that tight, closed-lip smile, the kind that wasn't a greeting. It was a warning. I gave a polite nod anyway, tugging Cooper's leash closer. But before I reached the end of the street, I could feel her eyes on my back, sharp as a blade. The next morning, I found a note taped to my door. No signature. Please be more careful with your dog. Some residents are concerned about safety. My first instinct was confusion. Safety? Cooper's biggest threat was drowning someone in affection. Still, I let it go. Maybe she'd misread something. Maybe Cooper had startled her by accident. I didn't want trouble. For a while, nothing happened. Life continued peacefully. I repainted the porch, started jogging again, even got invited to a neighborhood barbecue, though Karen was noticeably absent. People there seemed friendly enough. Ted from across the street, Marie who baked too much banana bread, and the Loris, yes, there were two, who traded HOA gossip like currency. But a week later, it started again. First came the looks. Every time I passed Karen's house, she'd appear, standing perfectly still beside her mailbox, phone in hand, pretending to scroll. Then the subtle gestures, her hand clutching her chest when Cooper barked, her deliberate steps backward when we passed by. Then came the first official letter. The HOA has received a complaint regarding your dog exhibiting aggressive behavior. My stomach sank as I read it, sitting alone at my kitchen island. Aggressive? Cooper wouldn't have known aggression if it bit him. Yet the notice demanded corrective action and warned of possible penalties for recurring incidents. I spent the evening pacing, the quiet tick of the kitchen clock echoing like guilt I didn't deserve. I knew who filed it. I didn't even need to ask. The next day, I saw her again, watering her flowers as I walked past. She didn't wave or smile, just watched with that faint, satisfied smirk that sent heat through my chest. I told myself to calm down. People like her thrived on reactions. But there was a darkness to her quiet, something calculated. And by the following week, it escalated. I woke to a knock on my door one morning, an HOA security officer, clipboard in hand. We've received multiple complaints, he said. My pulse quickened. Multiple? He glanced down at Cooper, who wagged eagerly at his feet, clueless to the accusation hovering over his head. The officer frowned, clearly seeing what I saw. A friendly golden furball incapable of harm. We just have to do a check, sir, he explained. I let them in. They inspected my yard, noted the leash, the cleanliness, even took photos of the fence. Everything spotless, everything harmless. Yet when they left, Karen was standing in her driveway, hands on her hips, pretending to prune flowers that didn't need pruning. Her eyes locked on mine, And in that long, unbroken stare, something became clear. This wasn't about a dog. This was about control. I tried to ignore it, tried to stay polite, but she didn't stop. She escalated, handwritten warnings placed on my porch, anonymous notes shoved in my mailbox, all echoing the same accusation, that Cooper was dangerous. Then came the false witness statements, supposedly from neighbors claiming he'd lunged or barked aggressively, each one fabricated, each one signed with shaky handwriting, and each one burning a deeper hole in my patience. A hollow feeling grew in my stomach whenever I stepped outside. The place that once felt like home now felt like a trap under bright skies, an illusion of calm maintained by people willing to bend truth to fit their comfort. Cooper, ever innocent, seemed to notice. He'd stay closer to me now, tilting his head toward every strange sound. Sometimes I'd catch myself apologizing aloud for something neither of us had done wrong. Then came the letter that changed everything. Final warning. One more complaint will result in mandatory removal of your pet from Willow Creek Estates. I stared at it for a long time, the world blurring at the edges. Removal, as if Cooper were an object, not a living being, not the soul that had carried me through heartbreak and loss. That single line ignited something in me. Not rage, but resolve. For weeks I'd played defense. But that night, as I sat beside Cooper in the dim light of my living room, I decided to stop being a victim. If Karen wanted to paint my dog as dangerous, then I'd show the neighborhood the real danger. The quiet cruelty that hid behind manicured lawns and fake smiles. I installed cameras the next morning. One in front, one at the side gate, another above the porch. Every inch of my property was now under silent watch, and it didn't take long to catch her. 2 nights later, at 10:43 p.m., my motion alert triggered. There she was, crouched near my fence, phone raised, whispering into it. Seconds later, she tossed something small toward the yard. Cooper barked once, startled but harmless, and she immediately pulled her phone up, pretending to film an attack. I replayed the footage 3 times, a slow smile forming. If Karen wanted a show, she was about to get one. And when the next HOA meeting arrived, I'd make sure every eye and every ear in Willow Creek would see the truth. Unfiltered, undeniable, devastating. Because some people don't listen when you speak calmly. They only listen when you expose their lies under the brightest light possible. The days following that night felt like the slow tightening of a coil. Every hum of a car engine, every creak of my porch steps sent a spark through my chest. The illusion of calm that Willow Creek wore like a badge of honor had cracked wide open, at least for me. People still waved as they passed, still manicured their lawns with proud precision, but beneath those neighborly smiles, I could sense the quiet curiosity forming, whispers spilling behind closed blinds. Karen, meanwhile, was acting as if nothing had happened. Every morning, she stood by her garden with meticulous rhythm, watering the same flowers that didn't need it, glancing toward my fence like she was waiting for me to slip. She didn't know that her tiny act had been caught, that every restless second she spent cultivating her lie was already immortalized in crisp, time-stamped footage. Knowing that gave me something I hadn't felt in weeks: control. Still, I couldn't act right away. Evidence meant nothing if handled poorly. The HOA board was a nest of bureaucracy wrapped in fake politeness. They wouldn't take accusations seriously without procedure and politeness. Kent Watkins, the HOA president, loved rules more than fairness, and Karen was one of his star soldiers. A reliable gossip source, a community advocate, the person who kept Willow Creek safe. But I had something far stronger than social clout now. Truth. I spent that weekend compiling footage. Every second that painted the truth stayed uncut. No edits, no exaggeration. Just reality, simple and quiet, clear enough to destroy her story. Clip after clip revealed the same thing. Karen staging provocation after provocation, tossing objects near the yard, muttering fake commentary into her phone, stepping close enough to trigger the sensors, then flinching theatrically for her video's benefit. The pieces began forming a pattern, one that looked deliberate and malicious. By the 3rd night, I had everything I needed, enough evidence to silence her accusations once and for all. but I decided to wait. The next HOA meeting was a week away, and I wanted her confidence to peak before that moment. I wanted her to feel untouchable before pulling the entire rug from beneath her. Those days unfolded quietly but with a strange electricity under the surface. I kept my head down, walked Cooper like normal, smiled politely at neighbors who still seemed unsure what to believe. Karen's smirk returned, sharper than before. One morning, she called out to another neighbor while watching me from her porch. Her voice syrupy sweet, but just loud enough for me to catch phrases like, "still aggressive," and "animal control." The same fake concern wrapped around venomous words. It was her performance, audience or not. That night, I found another note in my mailbox. The wording was different, but the message remained the same. Unleashed animals will not be tolerated. I laughed bitterly, holding the note under the porch light. She was trying to bait me again. But this time, the power dynamic had flipped. Her harassment no longer made me angry, it only made my case stronger. Every step she took deeper into manipulation was another nail in the coffin she was building for herself. By midweek, the neighborhood's whispers began to shift slightly. Ted, the man across the street, waved longer than usual. Dolores, infamous for gossip, gave me sympathetic looks while walking their Pomeranian. Rumors were turning direction now. Something in Karen's behavior had started rubbing others the wrong way. She wasn't discreet anymore. She was obsessed. Then came the knock. Late on Thursday evening, as the sunset painted the houses gold, Officer Myers, the same HOA security liaison, appeared again. Clipboard in hand, expression weary. Karen had filed yet another complaint. Aggressive barking and threatening behavior. I almost laughed when he read it aloud. He looked embarrassed as he took down notes, likely sensing he was being used as a pawn. Cooper stood nearby, tail thumping softly, head tilted in harmless curiosity. The absurdity of it all almost felt surreal. The officer apologized before leaving, muttering that he had to follow protocol. I didn't blame him. The system wasn't broken. It was just naive. Couldn't imagine someone exploiting it so completely. That night, I saved the newest footage. One clip showing Karen stealthily walking past my house minutes before the complaint call's timestamp. She'd rehearsed her moves perfectly, confident in a game she didn't realize she'd already lost. The weekend arrived. Quiet, heavy. Anticipation curled through the neighborhood like a distant hum. The HOA meeting was set for Monday evening, and already I could sense what was coming. Then, on Saturday afternoon, something happened that proved how far she was willing to go. As I worked in my front yard, trimming the hedge, I noticed a figure on the opposite sidewalk. Her, pretending to film the street with her phone. Suddenly, her hand snapped downward sharply. A faint squeal broke the air, and I spun just in time to see Cooper jump, startled, as a small rock clattered near him. I froze. She recorded the entire thing, whispering harshly into her phone, pretending again that Cooper had lunged toward her. A full performance, down to the fake gasp as she stumbled backward. And for a surreal second, I almost admired the dedication. She wasn't careless. She was addicted, obsessed with control, incapable of stopping herself. But this time I had her, not just in theory, but on two synchronized cameras, one capturing her hand throwing the rock, the other capturing her filming the attack. Her lie was no longer a narrative I needed to disprove. It had become a visible, undeniable fact. By dusk, I reviewed the footage in silence. Anger buzzed through my veins, but it wasn't the shaky kind. It was calm, measured. Each second of video brought me closer to justice, the quiet justice that didn't scream or argue, but showed. I imagined the meeting. Her polished words, the fake outrage, the little rehearsed gasps, and then the abrupt silence as her entire act played on screen before the same people she had fooled for months. That thought alone gave me peace. Sunday came, the calm before the storm. I spent the day walking Cooper under the orange autumn sky. For the first time in weeks, I felt light again. His tail wagged freely. The wind carried that crisp, hopeful scent of change. Still, even in peace, my mind replayed the months of false reports, the exhaustion of defending innocence against deceit. How close she'd come to succeeding, how easily people had believed her lies. This wasn't just about me or my dog anymore. It was about standing against someone who thought control gave her ownership of truth. And when Monday came, I was ready. I charged the laptop, printed copies of the footage timestamps, and packed everything neatly in a folder. Cooper watched from the window, tail flicking lazily, while I adjusted my collar in the hallway mirror. Outside, the neighborhood buzzed faintly, unaware of the quiet reckoning about to unfold in the community hall. For months, Karen had dictated the story, painting herself as the victim and me as the danger. But tonight, her narrative would end under a different kind of light. Because truth doesn't need to shout. It only needs to be seen. And soon, everyone in Willow Creek Estates was going to see everything. The evening of the meeting arrived like a quiet thunderstorm. Still on the surface, yet charged with tension beneath. The community hall, usually reserved for polite chatter and garden club sign-ups, pulsed with a low hum of anticipation. Word had spread quickly through Willow Creek Estates. Everyone who mattered was there. People who hadn't spoken to me in weeks now avoided my eyes. Some whispered as I passed, others offered tight, uncertain smiles. Karen was already seated in the front row, posture flawless, hands neatly folded around a stack of papers. Her appearance was no accident. Every detail screamed control. The pearl earrings, the conservative blazer, even the faint scent of a floral perfume carried the same message she always projected. Refinement, authority, innocence. Behind her, the Loris whispered to each other, eyes gleaming with that familiar hunger for drama. Ted stood awkwardly near the back, arms crossed, expression uncertain. Every seat filled quickly, the low rumble of voices fading when the HOA president, Kent Watkins, took his place at the podium. The meeting began as all HOA meetings do, with order, rules, and ritual. Kent greeted everyone, reading out maintenance issues, painting regulations, and minor community updates. But no one listened. Every head pointed toward the same undercurrent of expectation. The elephant in the room that had set everyone buzzing for days. Finally, Kent set his papers aside and looked up. "Our next item," he said, "concerns the ongoing incident involving a resident complaint over an animal safety concern." The words landed heavy. All eyes turned. A pause stretched long enough to crack the silence itself. Karen rose first. Her voice was calm, carefully modulated, dripping with the righteousness of someone who still believed the lie she'd built. She spoke about fear, about the unpredictable behavior of certain pets, about her concern for children's safety. Each word crafted like a blade that cut without leaving obvious blood. She gestured gracefully as she spoke, face full of practiced empathy. Her version of events sounded rehearsed, detailed, believable to anyone who hadn't seen the truth. In her story, she wasn't manipulative. She was noble, a protector, a neighbor forced into vigilance. I watched in silence, numb but collected. Let her go first. Let her weave her web as tightly as she could. Because the more intricate her story, the more spectacular it would be when it collapsed. When she finished, the hush in the room wasn't approval, it was uncertainty. Her performance had always had that effect. She wielded sympathy like a weapon. She glanced back over her shoulder at me, eyes gleaming faintly, that same look she'd given when the first letter arrived. Confident, self-assured. Then, Kent turned toward me. Would the accused resident like to respond? Every head turned again. The room's air seemed to thicken with expectation. I stood slowly, the chair's scrape echoing across the hall. My palms were dry, heart steady. I carried one folder. No notes, no written speech. Just a laptop and the truth quietly glowing inside it. I moved toward the small table near the projector. The faint hum of the machine filled the pause like the drone of waiting judgment. I didn't need to speak dramatically. The truth didn't need dramatics, only a stage. As I connected the laptop, the screen flickered, bright against the dim lights. I felt dozens of eyes fixed on me, but I didn't look back. In that moment, I didn't need their belief. I needed their silence. The first video played. There she was, the woman of grace and composure, crouched near my fence, whispering into her phone. The timestamp blinked clearly in the corner. She lifted her hand, tossed a small rock, stepped back, and raised her camera dramatically as Cooper barked once in mild surprise. Her entire incident unraveled in seconds, played out in full color. A low ripple of sound spread through the room. Not shock at first, but confusion. Then realization. Then murmurs. I clicked again, and the next clip appeared. Karen pacing near my mailbox under the cover of evening, dropping something into my yard. Another short bark, followed by her own exaggerated recording the next morning. A few gasps escaped now. People leaned closer. Kent's brow furrowed deeply. The third video followed, the most damning. Karen, standing outside my home at 10:43 p.m., crouched low, smiling faintly toward her phone camera before whispering, "Let's see him bark this time." She threw something small, likely food, toward the fence, then flinched artificially for her recording. Her expression under the flickering porch light was unmistakable. Not fear, not concern, but satisfaction. The clips ended. The silence that followed weighed heavy and complete. It wasn't the shocked kind of silence. It was the stunned, guilty kind. The kind that spreads when lies disintegrate right in front of you. Karen didn't move at first. Her face stayed perfectly still, frozen halfway between composure and panic. Her fingers clutched the stack of papers she'd brought. One slipped free and fluttered to the floor. The HOA members exchanged quiet, uncomfortable looks. Ted from across the room muttered something under his breath, and Dolores shifted uncomfortably, suddenly less eager for gossip. Kent finally spoke. His tone was restrained but laced with disbelief. He repeated phrases like falsified evidence, malicious intent, and misuse of HOA procedures. The meeting's balance shifted on the spot. All her months of manipulation undone in less than 5 minutes. Karen tried to speak once, voice trembling slightly now, full of denial. But no one interrupted the unfolding silence. People had already drawn their conclusions. The room that had once bent toward her now leaned away. I didn't gloat. I didn't need to. Watching her unravel was victory enough. Quiet, complete, irreversible. Kent ended the session abruptly, promising a formal investigation into Karen's actions and the clearing of all prior warnings. Official language filled the air, muted by the tension that still hung in the walls. When it was over, I closed the laptop and turned toward the back of the room. My steps felt light, strangely detached, as if I was walking out of someone else's nightmare. People parted slightly as I passed, some whispering words I barely heard, others staying silent but nodding in unspoken apology. Behind me, Karen remained seated, still and hollow, the posture gone, the mask cracked beyond repair. For a woman who fed on reputation and control, public humiliation was the cruelest kind of punishment. Outside, the night air felt sharp, clean, like the world had scrubbed itself of her lies. The moonlight glowed faintly over the perfect lawns and quiet fences. Somewhere behind me, I heard distant murmurs spill out of the hall as neighbors began to digest what they'd seen. For the first time in weeks, I breathed without tension. Cooper wagged his tail beside the car, waiting like none of it had ever mattered. His simple joy was grounding, almost poetic, a living reminder that truth, though slow, always finds its moment. Still, even as peace crept back into me, there was a shadow of instinct I couldn't ignore. People like Karen didn't vanish quietly. Humiliation was fuel to their fire, and I knew, deep down, this wasn't the end. Somewhere, behind the darkened windows of Willow Creek, that quiet storm was brewing again. And the next time it hit, it wouldn't be petty emails or anonymous notes. The next time, it would be something far more vicious. For a brief moment, it seemed as though peace had finally returned to Willow Creek Estates. The whispers subsided, the stares softened, and for the first time in weeks, I walked my dog without feeling eyes drilling into my back. Even the air felt different, lighter, freer, unburdened by hostility. Cooper trotted beside me happily, oblivious to the wreckage Karen's lies had left behind. But beneath the serenity, I felt it, the uneasy stillness that comes before a storm. Karen had been humiliated. In a neighborhood built entirely on appearances, that kind of disgrace didn't fade away. It lingered, festering like a wound she couldn't stop picking at. The days following the HOA meeting grew eerily quiet, too quiet. Her curtains were always closed, her car unmoved in the driveway, her garden abandoned to the creeping hands of untrimmed ivy. People whispered that she was recovering, that maybe she was too embarrassed to show her face again. But I knew better. Karen didn't disappear. She planned. The first sign came a week later. I found a letter stuffed inside my mailbox with no envelope, printed in large, uneven font. "You think you're clever," it read. "Everyone sees what you really are." No name, no signature, but I didn't need one. The smell of cheap cologne clung to the paper, the kind Karen's husband always wore. At first, I told myself to discard it, ignore the bait. But the second letter arrived 2 days later. And this one was worse. Printed photos, still shots taken from somewhere across the street, of me and Cooper in the yard, framed as though for evidence. The tone of the typed note was sharper, more direct. "You're being watched. Stay careful." The message wasn't about fear. It was about control, her favorite language. I began double-checking door locks at night, glancing through the window blinds more often than before. Cooper picked up on it too, pacing near the front door when headlights flickered past. The calm days were slipping away again, replaced by cautious nights and racing thoughts. Soon, subtle inconveniences began to surface. Garbage cans tipped over, packages left missing, small scratches on my car door. On their own, they were nothing, but together they painted a pattern. And just when I thought it might taper off, I woke one morning to something new. A red smear across my white fence, letters hastily drawn in paint. Dangerous. The irony sank in like poison. She was playing her old part again, twisting perception. Only now she was doing it in the dark, stripped of witnesses but still desperate for power. I called the HOA to file a report. They were apologetic but dismissive. "Without proof," the president said, "there's not much we can do." That sentence echoed through my mind for hours. Without proof. Proof had freed me before. Surely it could again. So I switched tactics. More cameras. Every angle. Every light post. I built my defense with quiet precision. Not from paranoia but preparation. And within days it paid off. Late one night, my notifications erupted. Motion detected at 11:57 p.m. I opened the feed, expecting the usual passing shadows, but my blood froze instead. There she was, Karen, crouched low behind my fence line again, gloves glinting faintly under the dim porch light. She wasn't just filming this time. She was tampering, cutting at something near the base of the fence with what looked like a small hand tool. My stomach churned as I realized what she was doing, loosening the boards near the gate where Cooper often slept. When she was done, she stood there for a moment, staring toward my house, breathing heavily. Then she tossed something small into the yard and disappeared into the darkness with a slow, measured walk. Calm, deliberate, deranged. The next morning, I found what she'd thrown. A piece of raw meat, coated with white powder, rat poison, that ended any illusion that this was a petty feud. It had escalated into something sinister. I reported the footage immediately. The police arrived that afternoon, took statements, photos, and samples. Their tone was serious now. The officers told me to stay vigilant and promised to process everything. But bureaucratic patience ran on schedules, not urgency. Karen's silence was deliberate after that. She stayed hidden, waiting out the investigation, confident that her perfect outward facade would shield her again. But her mistake, her fatal, irreversible mistake, was leaving behind her reflection. She had looked right into one of my cameras that night, face clear, eyes wild. I had her. The evidence wasn't just clear. It was damning, undeniable, a portrait of obsession and malice. Still, peace didn't return instantly. My mind wouldn't rest, constantly aware of her living just 2 houses away, plotting behind drawn curtains. Even with proof on my side, control was something she'd taught me not to trust. Days turned to weeks as the investigation dragged forward. The HOA tried to pretend neutrality, pretending Karen's actions were under legal evaluation, while simultaneously trying to hush further scandal. But the silence couldn't contain reality anymore. People whispered again, only now in shock. Not against me, but against her. Then came the night I realized everything was shifting in my favor. I walked Cooper down the block, the air heavy with autumn. A few neighbors greeted me gingerly but kindly this time. The looks were different, understanding, almost apologetic. The whispers now weren't fueled by gossip but by disbelief. Everyone had seen something online. Somehow the footage from my security cameras had leaked. I hadn't shared it. Someone from law enforcement must have accidentally passed it around. And soon the clips spread across Facebook groups, next-door posts, and text chains. The pristine image of Karen, community leader, rule enforcer, self-proclaimed protector, shattered overnight. By morning, her gray colonial house sat under the weight of judgment. People stopped waving when she stepped outside. Sidewalk conversations quieted when she passed. All her power, all her carefully cultivated control, dissolved into silence. Her retaliation had backfired. The predator had exposed herself for everyone to see. Yet even knowing that, I didn't celebrate. I stayed watchful, cautious, because humiliation doesn't reform people like Karen. It only breaks their mask. And broken masks have a way of cutting the hands that pull them apart. A week later, I received another HOA notice, but this time, it wasn't a complaint. It was an announcement. Emergency neighborhood meeting. Attendance mandatory. The topic, safety and accountability in Willow Creek Estates. That simple line was the omen. Something was about to happen, something final. Karen had lost her image, her authority, and her grip on control. And people like her don't vanish quietly. They implode. The notice for the emergency HOA meeting hit every inbox like a fire alarm. By the time Monday came, the entire neighborhood was throbbing with uneasy curiosity. Willow Creek Estates had always thrived on routine, perfectly chiseled appearances, unspoken rules, predictable social rhythms. But now, it pulsed with the chaos of something much darker. It wasn't a normal meeting. It was a reckoning. The title, Safety and Accountability, was vague, but nobody doubted what it meant. Karen's lies, Karen's downfall, the humiliation that had rippled through the neighborhood's perfect image. Everyone wanted closure. They wanted blood without admitting it. All weekend, people whispered on driveways and sidewalks, pretending sympathy but craving scandal. The dull hum of lawnmowers and hedge trimmers had returned, but underneath it was tension. The kind of heavy silence that comes right before lightning hits the ground. I didn't want to go. I'd already survived one circus. But something in Karen's silence made me uneasy. Since the last incident, I hadn't seen her once. No morning walks, no porch surveillance, no sweeping of invisible dust from her driveway. Her house looked lifeless, blinds perpetually drawn. Yet the mail still trickled in, and at night, a faint light glowed in the upstairs window. Somewhere inside that house, a woman who had lost everything was plotting her ending. By the time I arrived at the hall that evening, the parking lot was full. Cars lined the road corners, their windows glinting beneath the low orange light of the street lamps. The same faces gathered again, the cautious, the curious, the cruelly entertained. Conversations cut short when I entered, replaced by soft murmurs and darting glances. Karen wasn't there, yet her absence somehow made the room feel smaller, tighter, as though her shadow hovered in every unspoken sentence. The meeting began as usual. Kent Watkins at the podium, tapping his papers, trying to maintain professionalism though his tone was oddly strained. The board members shifted uncomfortably, eyes tired, shoulders tight with exhaustion. Finally, Kent cleared his throat. Tonight's session, he said, concerns ongoing matters of community safety, neighbor relations, and the recent incidents. That pause was heavy. Everyone knew exactly what he meant. He spoke slowly, carefully, about rules, about cooperation, about the importance of peace. But his voice quivered every few lines, betraying a tension he could no longer mask. Beside him, the head of the safety committee clicked through files, whispering occasionally, exchanging uneasy glances. Then he said it. I understand that Mrs. Patterson, Karen's name, was invited to this session to clarify certain matters. However, she declined to attend. It was like a spark through the crowd. A wave of whispers spread across the room. Hushed, questioning, speculative. Declined to attend. After months of drama and dominance, Karen had walked away from her own trial. But underneath the surface-level curiosity, dread began to form. A feeling that something wasn't right. Then, another HOA member stepped forward, holding a printed document, his voice shaking only slightly as he spoke. They were reading from the police update, language polished, distant, but heavy with consequence. The evidence had been reviewed, the footage authenticated, the sabotage confirmed. The incident involving rat poison was declared a criminal offense, investigation ongoing. Gasps murmured softly through the room. Some people covered their mouths. Others stared at their shoes, uneasy and silent. The perfect little neighborhood had been cracked wide open, and it was all there in one brutal declaration. Karen Patterson, formerly the loudest voice in the HOA, was officially banned from serving on any committee indefinitely, pending legal review. The board outlined safety protocols. They promised to restore trust and rebuild the spirit of community. But as Kent continued his speech, something about his expression shifted. His gaze moved toward the back of the hall. Just for an instant, his face paled. I followed that gaze. Through the hall's glass doors, outside under the dull glow of the streetlight, stood a shadow, still unmoving, half hidden behind a parked car. Even through the glass, even in that dim light, I knew who it was. Karen. She didn't move. She didn't storm in or shout or break down. She just stood there watching, her figure barely visible, yet her presence suffocating. It wasn't threat. It was something colder, the slow calculation of someone watching an empire go up in flames, determined not to look away. For a moment, no one else seemed to notice. The meeting continued, but my thoughts spun. Why was she there? What did she want? Then, as the meeting adjourned and people began filing out, I lingered near the side door, pretending to scroll through my phone while my eyes stayed fixed on that sliver of parking lot. She hadn't moved an inch. When I finally stepped outside, the night swallowed everything. The murmurs, the footsteps, the echo of small talk. I turned, looked directly toward the spot where she'd stood. The space was empty. Cold air pressed against my chest. A breeze stirred fallen leaves, scattering them across the asphalt. Unease crept through me again like it had in the early days. The feeling that calm was just a disguise, that danger could still be watching from behind pristine windows. Within days, chaos rippled once more through the peaceful facade of Willow Creek. 2 nights later, police sirens shattered the quiet. I woke to flashing red and blue lights outside my bedroom window. Voices filled the street, urgent, panicked, loud. By the time I stepped outside, the air reeked faintly of smoke. Across the street, near Karen's house, the patrol cars formed a haphazard semicircle. Officers hurried in and out, their flashlights tracing erratic paths through her front yard. Neighbors stood in clusters, whispering wildly, their faces bathed in the glow of emergency lights. The story emerged in fragments. A call from a passerby reported firelight in the Patterson backyard. Small but intentional. The police arrived quickly. Inside, they found something worse than flames. Karen's home had become a collage of chaos. Walls plastered with prints, screenshots, even community emails, all linked by red string and hand-scribbled notes. Her obsession hadn't ended. It had flourished, grown into madness. In every photo, every marked name, one image appeared in multiples, mine. Me, Cooper, my house, my yard. I felt lightheaded reading those words in the following morning's HOA newsletter. An official but soulless summary of madness. The neighborhood called it an incident. The police called it a welfare crisis. But to me, it was an ending. the last grasp of control from someone who couldn't live without it. Willow Creek fell eerily quiet after that. Her house was cordoned off, then emptied, the windows blackened and bare. People spoke of her gently for a while, then stopped speaking of her at all. Her name became a wound the neighborhood decided to heal by pretending didn't exist. But I remembered every letter, every scare, every twisted attempt to rewrite truth. And sometimes at night I could still see that image, her standing beyond the glass, watching. Not furious, not ashamed, just quietly broken. The news said she'd been taken for evaluation and wouldn't be returning. But the shadow she left behind, the quiet proof of how control can hollow a person out, that stayed. For weeks, I found myself walking slower past her empty house, lingering by the mailbox, staring at the blank windows that once glared at me. Cooper didn't bark now. He didn't even look. He just moved forward. And maybe that was his lesson to me. You don't reclaim peace by fighting ghosts. You just keep walking. Because the only thing more dangerous than a dog who's misunderstood is a neighbor who believes their lies are truth. It's strange how quickly a neighborhood can rewrite its own history. Only weeks earlier, Willow Creek Estates had pulsed with tension. Whispers of police cars, the glow of emergency lights, the constant hum of speculation that filled every pristine cul-de-sac. But by the time autumn rolled toward winter, the story had already begun to fade. Like ivy creeping up the sides of a wall, denial grew to cover everything unpleasant. Karen's house became the first visible scar in a street that prided itself on perfection. The windows were barred with plywood, the garden left to wither into tangled silence. Her mailbox sagged slightly, its nameplate gone, erased as though she had never existed at all. The board eventually decided to resell the property. A fresh start, they called it. But every time a new buyer came to tour, they backed out within a day or two. The whispers of what had happened there lingered too deeply. People still pretended it was over. They always do. After the incident, the HOA issued a public apology, a carefully worded statement about unfounded allegations and administrative oversight. It wasn't really about Karen. It was about the neighborhood trying to heal its image. Still, hearing my own name in that sterile announcement felt surreal. I was finally vindicated, cleared of every mark she'd tried to stain me with. And yet, the victory felt hollow. When people stopped looking at me like a villain, they didn't look at me like a neighbor either. It wasn't hostility anymore. It was discomfort, that uneasy mix of guilt and avoidance. The same faces that once judged me now couldn't hold my gaze. They'd learned something they didn't want to admit. That sometimes, danger doesn't bark. Sometimes, it smiles from the next driveway. In the following weeks, I rebuilt quietly. When the HOA dropped those false warnings from my record, I donated the old notices to the recycling bin. One by one, feeding them into the shredder until the soft mechanical hum filled the silence. Each fragment that fell away felt like a small release, like peeling off the layers of tension that had glued themselves to my days. Cooper changed too. He didn't startle at shadows anymore. He slept by the door again, calm and unguarded. The neighbors who once crossed the street now came forward timidly, offering gentle apologies wrapped in awkward laughter. I accepted them all with quiet smiles. Not because I forgave them, but because holding on to anger was a chain heavier than anything Karen had left behind. The investigation lingered longer than anyone expected. The news trickled out that Karen's case was moved to another jurisdiction. Her mental health under professional evaluation. No arrests, no jail time. Everyone called it sad. The kind of sanitized pity that people reserve for tragedies they'd rather forget. I didn't feel sad. I didn't feel justified either. Just empty. Sometimes, late at night, when the neighborhood slept and the air pressed thick with winter quiet, I'd find myself staring out the front window toward her house. Its dark shape stood like an unspoken apology from the street itself. The perfect symmetry of Willow Creek had cracked open for a brief moment and revealed something honest, something raw. And now it had closed again, pretending it never happened. But some scars never fully blend into the paint. One morning, weeks later, I woke to a flyer taped to my door. Holiday charity fair. Let's bring Willow Creek together again. It was glossy, cheerful, desperate to patch over burned edges. The HOA had decided that the neighborhood needed healing. The irony almost made me laugh. I went anyway, not out of interest, but out of observation. The fair was quiet but pleasant, cinnamon air fresheners and pumpkin candles masking something much older. People smiled too brightly. Children ran between stalls. Laughter came a beat too late. It was peace by performance, the one thing Willow Creek truly excelled at. Ted stood near the hot cocoa table and waved nervously when he saw me. Dolores approached too, babbling apologies that wilted halfway through. I nodded politely, exchanging small talk, realizing that for the first time in months, their words no longer mattered. Their approval didn't either, because I had learned something Karen never could. Reputation means nothing if you lose your peace to keep it. When I left the fair later that evening, the moon hung low behind Karen's old house. The brown grass shimmered faintly under the frost, and for the first time, I noticed something small tucked into the edge of her fence. A fragment of red paint, faded but still visible, clinging stubbornly to the wood. Dangerous. That one word, half erased by rain and time, stopped me cold. Not because it frightened me, but because it reminded me how close the neighborhood had come to believing it. How easily a single false story, repeated enough, became truth to those desperate to feel safe in their own perfection. I could have repainted the fence months ago. I could have washed every trace of her presence away. But I hadn't, not out of laziness, but as a reminder. Sometimes, peace isn't the absence of conflict. It's the quiet strength of knowing you survived it. Willow Creek moved on eventually. New neighbors arrived. New gossip took its place. Fresh coats of paint overwrote old scars. Yet even as life returned to its fragile harmony, traces of the story lingered between the cracks. A ripple beneath the polished surface. A caution whispering through white fences and glimmering lawns. And every so often, when Cooper and I pass Karen's house on our evening walks, I can still feel that faint shiver of memory, the echo of what once haunted this place. But now it doesn't stir fear, only reflection. Because in the end, Karen was right about one thing. My dog was dangerous. Not to people, not to neighbors, but to lies, to illusion, to the fragile deceit that held this neighborhood together. Cooper's truth, his quiet innocence, had shattered every false mask she wore. And when truth breaks something built on lies, it doesn't just fall apart quietly. Collapses loudly, dramatically, beyond repair. That's the real danger of honesty. It doesn't bark. It burns.